Hi, I'm Greg Claiborne, and I am a photographer. I have a group of my friends with me, Kenneth Nelson above, the Mark Skinner to the left. We're all photographers. And coincidentally, we all graduated from Pratt Institute in New York. So, Brooklyn, New York, that is. Don't forget the Brooklyn. We're doing this as a part of our discussions on photography because we love photography. We've been doing it for over 30 years and with varying levels of success, but we've done some things. So we're going to do some discussions about photography. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about the transition from film to digital photography, and how that affects, or how digital affects, how we photograph today. So hope you'll stick around, and I'm going to open it up. Kenneth Nelson and Mark Skinner, take it away. Oh no.
Okay, so I guess I can start.
Hold on,
So
hold on, hold on. No, it stops. Hold on. Damn it, I got to do it again.
no, it's not. It's
Something.
still
I got to shut off. No, no. It
uh,
said, oh, it's still going?
we're still
Yes, it
recording.
is. Okay, sorry. I got to turn off these notifications. They keep popping up. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So basically, I'll start because I think the transition from film to digital for me was pretty major. I'm actually going through a couple of those concerns right now, or at least thoughts. And I think if I had to say one thing about the transition from film to digital for me is that the transition has made me react quicker, think faster, shoot faster, and shoot more. So when I was shooting film, or when I do shoot film, I'm going out with the mindset of a certain set of images to take. So and that really depends on how much film you take with you. So if I take 3 rolls of film with me and I'm shooting 2 1/4, that means I'm going out to shoot only about 30 shots. So I'm going to be pretty economical on what I photograph. The difference between that and digital is that when I go out, I have a 16 gigabyte card with enough space for about a little over 430 images. So I usually am going to think differently digitally than I do when I shoot film. Now that's in terms of conservation of film, not necessarily, and of course, again, to some degree, it actually changes the way I think about what and how I photograph. Uh, the
Only
film
400 image? How big an image are you shooting?
it's a 30 each image on a is a digital negative, so it averages about 32 megs per shot on a raw
Wow.
file,
Okay.
you know.
Oh, you shoot
So that,
raw. So you shoot raw.
yeah, I shoot only raw. I don't shoot raw plus JPEG. It doesn't matter to me. Just raw. And
And you're a Leica man. What are you shooting with?
the camera that I'm shooting with, oh, it's a Leica M10.
Sweet. Okay, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
So what's happening is actually, and also one of the major components that makes me photograph differently is not only the film to digital, but actually the type of lens that you're shooting with. I have an option to shoot with 3 different lenses for the digital camera, and I photograph differently when I shoot with a 50 versus when I shoot with a 28, because the intent is totally different. When I shoot with a 28, my intent is to work closer, or close into subjects or closer to objects, where when I shoot with a 50, I'm dependent on being just a little bit back, but also shoot differently because I shoot more wide open when I shoot with a 50, where I don't shoot wide open when I shoot with a 28. So there are a lot of differences in why I shoot.
What do you mean wide open? Like f-stop or?
Yeah, with the 50, I'm going to shoot at f2, which is the widest opening on the 50.
Oh, sweet.
When I shoot with the 28, I'm going to average about an f5.6,
Right,
because I'm just
but
depth of
Ken, I
field.
think you have to explain the type of photography that you do and why those settings are important.
Well, okay. So again, I'm a street shooter, and I've been a street shooter. Yeah, for a long time. And so when I'm shooting, there's certain aspects of photography that I gravitate to. And when I switched over to digital, one of the major components of my photography had to do with engaging with people more and engaging in people in specific situations. And so for the last couple of years, my main thrust of photography has been to photograph congested places, crowded places, the reactions of people in crowded places. Why do they go there? And usually it's in certain situations where it's shopping malls and shopping areas, and where people coalesce on specific corners and how they interact once they meet up in congested places, and what people are thinking when they go into places like that. For instance, I go into crowded places to photograph it. I hate being in crowded places, but I go there and overcome my dislike of crowded places in order to engage in trying to get to the root of why I feel the way I feel when I'm in places such as crowded places like that.
And you live in New York. There are no uncrowded places. What do
You nowadays,
you? No,
many
no.
left.
I was just saying that because the series you did in the subways and on the streets in Manhattan, it's just like claustrophobic, and you did that in the your Coney Island house series. Amazing. What is your website? Because your work is amazing.
Yeah, anyone can see me at KennethNelsonPhotography.com.
Sweet. Okay. Good. And also, you just had some of your Black Lives Matter photographs picked up by a major museum in New York. Is that right?
Yeah, right. Well,
Mr. Humble.
the Museum of the City of New York did a reach out on social media, and they said if you tag your images with a specific tag, activist New York, and linked it to their social media page, they would look through and cull through some of the images and basically create a sort of a sister or a related exhibit with an exhibit that's already inside the building, but since the building is closed, you have no access to it. So this was a sort of an alternate way to still speak to the activist New York as well as the COVID New York. Well, not necessarily the COVID, but the activism within the building's exhibit. So they did it as an outside exhibit on their patio, and that's on 104th Street and Fifth Avenue, New York.
Sweet. So do you think you would have been able to do this had it not been for digital? Does digital have its ups?
Again, yeah, my mentality would have changed. Yeah, I cannot photograph with film, at least with the current camera that I have, or the current camera that I use for film. I don't have the ability to move and photograph the same way as I do with the digital camera. So if I were shooting with so I'm shooting with a Leica M10. If I was shooting with a Leica M6, I'd be able to shoot in that same situation without any problem. But I don't shoot a Leica M6. I don't shoot 35 millimeter film. When I choose to photograph with film, it's always going to be medium format. I've always loved the way medium format looks when it's printed or even when it's scanned. You can speak to the equivalency of digital being high performance as film. That's not what I'm going for. For me, it's just about what I remember feeling for film and the results I got when I was shooting film and how that scanned in and how that looked on the print and even in the scan was something that spoke to me. So some people can call it the naturalness of it or the organic nature of film. That would be one of the ways I would speak to the organic nature of film, where it intrigues me to no degree how wonderful I feel when I photograph film. And again, the major reason why I shoot film is not for the amount of exposures that I can. So that's why I haven't shot 35 millimeter in years, decades, because I just don't like the idea of shooting a 36 exposure roll. I like shooting smaller exposure rolls, 10, 12, that's it, in and done. You don't need to, it's just too much stuff to shoot with when you're shooting 36. Then you're looking for things to photograph. You're saying, oh yeah, I'll photograph that because I have 36 exposure rolls. Well, not otherwise I would. No. That's what I got.
Well, I think for me, I think it's a lot. I think for me, the most significant difference is the emphasis on uh, photographing your subject, whatever that is, versus post-production or darkroom work. Darkroom work was more of a finishing uh, activity rather than an activity that was almost equal to the actual image capture previously. I mean, I used to photograph film quite a bit in the late 80s, early 90s. And then by the late 90s, I left the photography business entirely. But that was after being introduced to digital photography at the photo studio that Ken and I both worked at. We were photographing catalog work with 4x5 cameras and 8x10 cameras. And so that was a very slow, methodical way of lighting a subject, photographing the subject, waiting for the film to return and make adjustments to the image capture that would sometimes take a day or two for that particular subject, meaning a product that was on a set waiting to be photographed for a printed catalog. For years, I did not photograph anything at all. And then when my wife and I had kids, excuse me, we started taking photos again for family purposes. And then I found myself leaving the copier business that I'd gone to and starting photographing again. But I was photographing a greater variety of things than I had done previously. Before the studio.
I just gotta throw in there. These guys are so humble. This guy Ken and that guy Mark. They were both like Macy's, working for the photography department at Macy's. Not like, Joe's Photoshop and Passport on the corner. Just want to throw that out there.
You have to say the parent company. Thank you, I appreciate it. But technically, you have to say.
Oh, sorry.
We're working for Federated Department Stores because we were for him and Strauss. And
I don't know if you guys wanted to talk about that.
That's
Go
right.
ahead.
They merged. Ken left. I went into the digital asset management part of the Macy's studio. And but what I originally, before I got into the studio, I used to photograph models, composites, and small magazines I used to photograph for when I was a brat, and a little bit after that. But when I came back to photography in the 2009, I think it was 2008, 2009, the type of work was very, very different. And even though the cameras had very similar form factor, 35 millimeter style single lens reflex cameras were now digital. The most, as Ken pointed out, the most amazing part of it is that fast. But the most amazing part to me, the second most amazing part was that a lot of emphasis was on a post-processing. Previously, you would develop a roll of film. If it was transparency, you would look at the film itself, and you would see your final image there. Quite quickly, it was very simple. Take the picture, process the film, you have your image. With color negative or black and white, you would you would process the film. There was one more step to make a print, but usually between the print and the negative, there was a contact sheet made so that you could see all of the images that were done in that initial session, which was usually a roll of film or two, and you would select there. Take a little more time editing. These days, Lightroom and Ep1, those are the two programs that I know off the top of my head that tend to replicate contact sheet philosophy. You can look at a group of images at the same time and select easily. But there's something different if you have that ability to look at images like that, because quite honestly, you're looking at a screen. It's not as I think the biggest difference for me as a photographer is that analog photography was, of course, it was artistic. It was a little bit technical. It was a little bit technical. It was a little bit about light and seeing light and understanding the physics of how light affected film. And a lot of that isn't quite there. We still have to figure out how light affects the sensor but the idea that you are limited to a specific emulsion and a specific film speed, that doesn't exist.
Not at all. So you think that's a good thing? I mean, what is your feelings about the transition?
I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's necessarily, well, I mean, it's definitely good. I mean, it has to be good in that you can acquire more images. I mean, that's just, I mean, the ultimate goal was to be able to get more images. But there was something about the ability to understand the materials that you were working with and the tools you were working with, to not know what you were going to get ahead of time. And hours, maybe days, in some instances, months later, because you understood how those materials and tools worked so intimate, you could visualize, to borrow words from Ansel Adams, how your image would look. And these days, I think with the facility that digital cameras give you, that portion of of photography isn't there so much anymore. And it's just, it takes a little bit of the pride and the ego of knowing the materials that well out of the equation. And it seems a little bit more like work than it did magic.
Well, there's still a lot of work with the digital. No, I don't. Maybe I missed what you were saying.
Well, what I'm saying is a certain level of pride that a craftsman would have, a craftsperson, I should say, in understanding what the film would do, what the latitude of the film was, how much light you needed to expose the film properly, how much time you would need and what temperature you would need to process the film, how much time and temperature you would need. That's not so much time and temperature, how much time and at what aperture you would have to set your dark room, your enlarger, to project the negative onto a piece of paper. There were steps that required much more understanding of your materials.
It's a medium, the art, yeah.
Get everything right than today. Today, you have to understand your materials to perfect your product. And that's very different.
Well, a lot of it now, it's been programmed into the cameras from, those who knew what lighting situation, what activity you were shooting, so that the camera knows, oh, that there's a lot of things going on here. I better speed up the shutter speed or whatever. Or astrophotography. Now, being able to have like 3200 or 64,000 ISO is just like a game changer.
It is a game changer, but I find myself, once again, I find myself more interested in post-production than in pre-production. Let's face it, if we were going to photograph indoors by either theater lights or someone's home lights, unless you went and bought filters specifically to change the color temperature of the film that you normally use, or you would have to go select tungsten balanced film. It was like a big deal. It cost more. You had to go find it. You couldn't find that at any place that sold film. You had to go to a specific camera. You had to go to a camera store to get it. And it was only in transparency. It wasn't in color negative. And that limitation meant that there was intention in what you were doing that required so much more thought and pre-planning than what tends to be done. I'm not saying people don't do it, but what tends to be done. Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, is that like, it's also kind of like the transition from, the traditional photographers who had to know what they're doing, and the magic that was, because only a few people could do it, to when the Kodak introduced the Brownie, and then everybody had a camera. And that was a game changer. You still had to get it, printed by somebody who knew what they were doing. But then now it went from, essentially that, it took that out of it. The cameras know everything, and now we've got everybody with a camera and their phones and this and that, and the digital is again changed the game.
I also find that qualitatively, the certain level of proficiency isn't required pre in your capture. There's a tremendous amount of photography that is done with the intention to manipulate the image after the capture. And I'm always surprised now, even with documentarian style photographers, the idea that if there are, if the subject is a person standing in a crowd, a lot of times they know, well, I'm not only going to crop here and there, I'm going to change the focus a little bit here so that this person gets accentuated. And maybe I'll even remove the person who's wearing a blue hat because every other hat is red, or I'll remove the red hat because every other hat is blue. And I want to show a sea of blue hats, but just one person doesn't have it. And those are the types of things that are done more often than they were in the past, and that changes the nature. It's more illustrative and less a document.
So are you saying that digital, by taking some of the tech work out of it, has made photography more creative? Do I hear you saying that, or?
Well, I think it's become more creative at the expense of permanence. And when I say if you take a photograph of, let's take a black and white. Let's take the everything out of it. You take a black and white film photograph of someone jumping over a puddle, and
a la Cartier-Bresson.
Right, and if you've exposed correctly and you've framed it properly in whatever camera you're using, and you prove that with a filed negative carrier so that you can see the entire image, that was proof. The idea that was a document, of what actually occurred in real life isn't as permanent for any photograph. It requires, most photographs now require some sort of contextualization. If you see a bus accident
you totally lost me. I'm just saying.
What I'm saying, if you photograph a bus that's hit a mailbox, right?
Okay.
You photograph that, and it's on the cover of the New York Times, bus mailbox, right? That context tells you that, oh, that's a real document. If you see that in a newspaper website that is of lesser esteem, right? Bus hits, let's say it's the bus hits mailbox, and you see it on, I don't know, if you see it as an example of how Adobe can enhance your photography, because Adobe's in the business of selling you image manipulation software, they may not have done anything to that image that you see on the left. That the mailbox, because you feel,
you're still losing me.
That must be a retouched photo until you read, this is retouched. If you click here, you'll go to what we did to it, and you'll see. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's a sense of distortion of reality to some degree that was not inherent in imagery before the adoption of digital. But now the idea of truth in imagery is no longer as strong or as it's not as inherent in it, because before you can believe a photograph to be a photograph. Now you cannot believe a photograph to be a photograph anymore. It is something else, and therefore
unless it's validated by a reputable source or some other the intention of the display.
Wait.
Yeah,
Has
it's
to be-
it's
The pictures lie all the time. They were lying from way back when. No,
well, in that you are creating a construct where you're editing to a specific message, right? But the difference is that the intention is to portray that image in the past through film as the truth. Now, you may have photographed that same mailbox on the other side where you can't see that the bus hit the mailbox. It looks fine and dandy. And you can put that in a newspaper and say, look, mailboxes, right? If someone else takes the same photograph and includes the bus, you go, oh, okay, mailboxes are being hit by buses. That's in the past. Now, if you see the picture of the mailbox, you believe, okay, it's a mailbox. But if you read on top, mailboxes harmed by buses, you go, well, what'd they do? Why'd they cut out the bus? You know, everyone is much more aware. I think, well, I guess what I'm getting at is that digital photography has increased the visual literacy of the entire populace. And so the idea that a photograph is a record that is indisputable is completely gone. Even though you could dispute it before, those who were not in the photography business did not understand as,
okay.
as much
So,
as
yeah.
so, but that was a good graphic you put up there, Ken. What is truth in photography?
Yeah, it is because it's and it's funny because I can't figure out when it began to happen, but I think you can actually attribute it in some ways to actually prior to the digitalization because there was photo manipulation even in photograph. We were just talking about it even last week. Photo compositions in black and white. One of the major art photographers we talked about last week. I don't remember his name.
Gary
Uh,
Ellsman, one of my
Gary Oldman.
favorites.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so surreal, and that was surrealism. So the question I guess I have is the transition from film to digital and a manipulation of digital, is it considered surrealist, or is it something else?
well, I would say depends on
What
what
are those, Trace?
right? I mean, it's surrealist if what you're putting into the photo or removing from the photo didn't exist. You know, you're making editorial decisions that are augmenting the reality for the sake of illustration rather than showing a factual document or a factual depiction of what you believe is there. I mean, you know, you talk about the reality in photography. You know, the painter Whistler, you know, back in the early probably understood that his portrait business was pretty much not only at odds with other painters, but also under attack from the relatively new medium of photography at that time. And he makes a series of paintings called, I think it's Portraits in Shades of Gray or something like that. And one of the most famous ones is called Whistler's Mother. I think the actual name of that painting is like Mother in Shades of Gray or a Portrait of Woman, you know, something like that. But he actually talks about it being in shades of gray. And look at how that painting is constructed. It's very much flat, slightly telephoto lens. But to get back to the digital part of it, I just think that the idea that a photograph is a record has diminished a great deal. It's much more disputable. When people would do lighting magic and even retouching to photograph a pack of cigarettes, not that I advocate smoking, you would believe initially that would be what the pack, right? And so I don't think anyone looks at an advertising photograph and believes that, unless they're a child. I don't think any adults look at a tube of toothpaste and go, oh boy, that looks like great toothpaste. You know what I mean? I don't think they think that. They think that because of the copy in the advertisement or maybe, you know, what was shown otherwise, the great dental work or the promise that's in the copy.
Okay. But isn't that also, like you're saying, there was a time when a photograph was a photograph, and you could believe that what the photographer shot was reality. But with the advent of digital and the ability to manipulate it and create a deep fake, which is really scary with the digital video. But now you're saying that because of the digital, it takes away the credibility, like you were saying, Ken. What is truth in photography? But what is happening now, you can't deny, is that I would say, since everybody has a camera, now they're no longer, going to rely for their news sources in the newspapers. They have like 300 or 400 people at the event shooting the same thing. So they may not have one person giving you the vision. I'm New York Times. This is what happened. They've got 300 people who are also there who saw it differently.
True. But previously, there were clearly delineated lines in the entire photographic process. There was exposure, there was processing, and then there was retouching. And now there's image capture, which is a computer term to begin with, scanning image as opposed to exposure, right? Because you're not really exposing film with an emulsion. It's not an organic idea anymore. And then basically what you're doing now is everything else is post. And that idea that now the darkroom and retouching are fused into this idea called post. And it's a very vague term to begin with. It's post-processing, that includes, before it was just really crop and burn and dodge. Really about it. That was really the only manipulation you really did.
In the true photojournalistic world. But
Right.
Now we're getting, a lot of things are photo illustration, They may not be intended to be an accurate depiction of what was. I don't know. I just feel like digital opened up a whole lot of doors creatively and journalistically. Because the speed of it was
right. Now, and to speak to that, I got to say you're absolutely right. There are far, far, far more opportunities that I had been for photography to work as a photographer after 2008 than prior to 1995, right? In that time, digital photography became much more popularized, but even as magazines diminished, all of these other needs for photography became more acceptable. Meaning, previously, I would not have been able to photograph weddings, right? Because that required having a Hasselblad. It required, having a book of someone else's wedding and having a big album to show that was hundreds of dollars in the 80s. You really had to put up a lot of money up front to get to do a wedding. These days, if you want to do a wedding, if you can find a wedding to do, because that's even kind of going away, you can photograph a wedding because people, that someone doesn't mind you photographing, and you can put together a website relatively inexpensive, and you can call yourself a wedding photographer. But then the problem becomes, how do you make money as a photographer in the digital world above free, above a fee?
So you're saying digital has just the ability of picking up an automatic camera and pointing it and shooting it, you can become a photographer.
Not just automatic. It's just the nature of being able to see the image the instant you photograph. I mean, every photograph is what we would have called a Polaroid, but it's a high quality Polaroid, and it's easily, if you give the Polaroid to the customer right there.
Right. I remember the days in the studio where before you actually did the shoot, you had to shoot a Polaroid to show the client what it is, your proof of concept. So right. I know you guys used,
but a running gun. You had to continue photographing through the entire event, and let's put it this way: when I photographed weddings, because I did a few, and then that kind of vanished. When you photograph a wedding, if you go to a church, or a temple, you can photograph inside low light. Previously, you really couldn't get a lot. You had to use a flash camera because the film speed was limited. So you had to kind of know your flash, know your film stock, know your distance, focus on your own in the low light, right? Through a prism or through or with a mirror. Take that photograph after lining everyone up, and you couldn't get as creative because you couldn't. Most people wouldn't have accepted 35 millimeter for their wedding. Usually required medium format. There were conventions in the business that most people felt were the accepted way to do things. So like you were saying, Greg, the creativity has increased quite a bit. The latitude of what's acceptable to a client has increased in digital, and the numbers of opportunities have increased. But I would say overall the monies that one could get for the task being performed diminished greatly over the years.
Hmm. Yeah, it's tough. I'll say it straight out because I mean, it's gotten simpler. Photography essentially, these cameras are smart. They do amazing things that just 10 years ago wasn't even on the scope. Because I mean, I started out way back when, like you guys do, and you had the darkroom in your bathroom, and the magic of watching the image come up in the developer, which was great. But then as you progress and technology changes, and I did some fashion stuff like you. I did some wedding stuff, like both of you guys did, I'm sure. But it was, there was something missing. So I did the Navy thing. I went in the Navy, became a photojournalist in the Navy, and public affairs and all that stuff. And going to events, I'd see stuff on TV. The president is talking about, oh, the bad guys are over there. And the next morning we were on our way there. So we take pictures, and then darkroom stuff. We could do it in darkroom, but then the changeover when we work with those first basic digital cameras, being able to shoot an event, pull out the memory card, pop it in the computer, bring up the image, minor adjustments, and then it's off to Washington. That was the coolest thing on the planet, man. But then after that, coming back home, I still had the love of photography, so I just go out and do street shooting, which was always fun, and the digital just changed everything. I met a lot of photographers, young and old, that are coming out with photo compositing, which was just, some of it just blew me away. Photo illustration, taking shots of one thing, and then what I found, I love the straight, nothing because like I'm a big Cartier-Bresson fan, I'll admit it. The decisive moment, there's nothing like being in the right place, the right time, or seeing a situation, setting yourself up and getting a great shot because you knew that was happening. Something's going to happen. But you've got like a gang for every one of those shots. You've got like 40, 50 or 50 rolls of shots that really didn't work. But I think the cool part about if you're willing to spend some time in it, photo compositing, you can take pieces out of one photo and stick them all together and make an image that had nothing to do with anything. So what did I do? I took a photography class just for fun when I got back to the States, and that was one of the projects. Do photo compositing. We pulled crows and picnic tables and daisies and put them different sides and made our own little composition. Photo composition. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the whole transition. I guess I fought it just like everybody else. Oh no, traditional photography, it has to be film. But man, when I saw what digital could do, and then outside of the traditional photojournalistic part of it, what you could do in Photoshop or now Lightroom, man, it just opened up so much. You can go in and do fine work and masking and, blurring and, all sorts of layers and stuff. It's just a whole new world, and I'm excited to see where it's going to go next. That's what I got. You've been really quiet, Mr. Nelson. What are you doing up there? Surfing the web?
No, I'm just thinking about what you're saying and just trying to soak it in and see if I have any questions. But I haven't thought of anything yet.
All right.
No.
Well, and I will say this, in general, image quality is better in digital. If you want an upside,
Now it is.
I think now it is. And I remember saying many, many years to Ken, oh, it'll be 5 years. And you went, no, it'll be more like 15. You were closer than I was because it took about 20 years, 25 years to get really
For the
top
resolution
quality.
to match film?
Yeah. When we started shooting in that studio, we were shooting with what? What was the file size? It was like 7 megapixels on that CCD camera.
And that was a lot.
It was a 20 meg file that was it was a CanImage camera. The company's still in Long Island City, the ones that used to market that. It was a Roche Pharmaceuticals medical imaging camera of some sort, and they had mated it with a 286 computer that had 64 megs, not gigs, but 64 megs of RAM. And what was 64? It was 68 megs of RAM, I think, and a 2 gigabyte hard drive. Yes, it was $68,000, 64 megs of RAM, and it was a hot light only digital imaging camera. But the key was that I think we're using Photoshop 4 or something like that with it. In any event, the big deal was that you had to expose the it was like a high octane surveillance camera tethered to the computer, and it had a board that went from the cable directly into the computer. And you could, I think 7 was what we settled on for the sake of storage, because back then storage was relatively expensive, and if you're photographing a catalog, you've got 40 or 50 images per catalog at that time that you had to submit. So 7 meg was like a big deal per day, per photography, per image, excuse me. So when you have a 20 megabyte file for, say, a room set, that was a lot. And you had to make sure you had enough lights, hot lights, because the LEDs didn't exist, and strobes weren't possible. It wasn't possible to use strobes with this camera because it was they had a piezo activated chip, and it shook, so you had to open it and have a time exposure. I don't remember what the exposure times were. I think they were like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, things like that. And it took that long to get a still image, but it was very flat. It was a contrasty image that was created. So that changed the way we photographed a great deal. We could use more spotlight prior to that because film had the ability, the emulsion would sort of spread the light as it captured, and it was flatter to begin with in some ways. And so, and the coatings on the lenses, so everything created a flatter image overall in the analog world. By the time we got to digital, we found that we had to use a lot more light in order to, a lot more scrimmed light or diffused light to balance out, to create that 240 point RGB what do you call it? Threshold, not threshold, range, the dynamic range. We had to create the dynamic. I think it was like not even that much, 210. It was like 30.
You had to do all of that in your head?
We had to do that. I'm trying to remember, but not in our head. But what we had to do is we had to create an image, import it into Photoshop, measure the image. If the black point was down to 10 or 15, that was too black for the printer to handle the halftones that they would create from these files. So you had to increase amount of light, so your darkest area was between 30 and 40 RGB. And then you had to make sure, and you were using tungsten lights that were not balanced to the exact same tolerances. So, one light might be a little magenta, one light might be a little bit cyan.
Oh my God, that sounds like a nightmare.
But you saved a tremendous amount of time and a tremendous amount of money on film, and that was why they migrated a good amount of the imaging originally to that.
And
It's just
remember,
a cost.
yeah,
Huh?
Polaroid 4x5 Polaroid was pretty daggone expensive,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
it,
yeah.
oh yeah, and those were the proof prints or the proof negs or the proof prints. So that's how you basically gauge exposure, and you make the relationship from the exposure from the Polaroid to exposure for the camera, or at least that's what we did. So this saved a lot of money.
Yeah, the fudge factor and a lot of time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'd photograph something 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you had to leave that on set overnight because you'd make sure that the film got into the 6 o'clock car that got to the lab, and the lab would come back by about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. You'd check your chromes. If there was an adjustment you had to make, you made your adjustment, broke set, and when that film came back at 2 o'clock,
But wasn't Polaroid, if I remember correctly, Polaroid was notoriously terrible color balance.
what we had was a fudge factor. That's also part of that magic. You knew what your black and white Polaroid. There were two different Polaroid emulsions we used. I think it was 55 and 54. And if you knew how that translated to Ektachrome 64 4x5 when you took the photograph, then I don't remember whether it was +1 stop, -5R. I don't remember what it was, but there was a fudge factor that changed every day as you processed the film, because the E6 process would change your color balance ever so slightly as the run of the machine during the course of the day. So if there was, I don't know, if it was Fashion Week, I don't think they had Fashion Week so much back then, but there were a lot of fashion shows and everybody was shooting E6 and they're all getting processed at our lab, the E6 machine would run differently than if it did on a day or a week where there wasn't so much volume depleting the what do you call it, the silver, right? Depleting the chemistry. It was
Sounds like a
very
nightmare.
Yeah, you had to minimize your variables as well. So that's why when you brought your
right.
film, you brought batches of film with the same stock number. You brought
Yeah.
your Polaroid with the same stock number. So we could go pretty much about a month on one batch of film, just one batch number of film. So that was pretty consistent. So if you took that out of the equation, you came out a little bit ahead of the game more so than not.
Right. You'd have to buy, what is it? I don't remember the numbers. It was like 20 or 30 boxes of 50 4x5 film, and then the same in both emulsions of Polaroid. That was the crazy part because we had to have 54 because I think it was different if you used straight. This is for analog. If you use strobes, oh well, we could check with our other coworkers, but it was a nightmare. But it was a technical proficiency that you were proud of achieving, and I think that's my original point: is that there were photographers who understood that, memorized it, whatever you want to call it, and there were right paths in understanding that. And it's not that digital doesn't have a lot of those same principles. It's just that the difference between being a professional and a serious amateur was great. It's not as great now.
Okay. Uh, I think Greg, you still there? I think we lost Greg's video.
I think we did. So why don't we take a little break and wait till he comes back in.
He's recording the call.
Still there, Greg?
All right. Well, since we're at the actually about an hour into the conversation, and just for brevity, I think it might be just a good idea to. Uh, there you go, Greg.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. I was just mentioning that we're close to an hour and maybe a little bit over an hour into the conversation. So
50
maybe
minutes. We're at 50 minutes. You want to wrap it up?
okay, yeah, sort of, yeah. So any closing thoughts or ideas?
I
Yes.
personally, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to say, as much as I complain, you've heard me complain in this conversation about the difference between analog being waxing poetically about how much better you had to be to do this and blah 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 and all that. I find digital photography, uh, like I said, afforded me opportunities that I didn't have when I photograph pageant contestants and do the portraiture for them and the actual pageants. That is the type of work that previously I would not have been able to do because, quite honestly, I don't think a lot of customers would have trusted me to do that type of work. There's also a level of acceptance that it's not as difficult as it could be with digital. People understand the instantaneous good results, and because everyone has a camera in their pocket, they may not be professionals, but I can take a chance, and that's the difference. I feel that for me personally, I've had more people feel that they could take a chance on me than previously. Won't make as much per image, but you know, there are more opportunities.
So
You know,
they've almost got from it's got to be really top shelf
you
to this is
know,
good enough.
2020 being completely dismissed. It's 2012, 2020 being completely dismissed. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Greg.
No, it's gone from it being having to be totally proficient and totally on point sharpness and professional to good enough.
Well, I think
'Cause,
also aesthetic has changed. I'm sorry, Ken. I mean, step on what you were about to say, but bokeh is an idea that I don't really remember hearing about until maybe the last 10 years, 12 years.
depth of field, good Lord. Go ahead.
Previously, if you took a photograph of a glass on a table, they'd say, "What happened to the table? It's fuzzy," And now bokeh, people are starting to criticize it finally, but for a good 10 year, good decade, bokeh was a very big deal, and the ability to achieve incredible sharpness and a shallow depth of field was very very much encouraged, and so that taste change, that and the very flat overhead food photography that was popularized by Martha Stewart's magazines. That those two things have changed a lot of photography, I think, professional photography. The overhead, because we see little film strips, overhead, how to make omelets and so forth. Previously, an overhead photograph of a meal on a table would not have been as acceptable. But I'm talking 20 years, 30 years now. But good.
Ken, you got something?
Only go. I'm a feeling type of person, so I go by feeling. So, my essence, the essence of my feelings are definitely in the organic nature of photography. So I still harken back to that. That's why I still actually have not departed with any of my darkroom equipment. I still will hold on to it until forever, because I think at some point in time it will allow me the joy of which I once held when I was processing film and printing in the darkroom. So with that, I would think that again, I enjoy digital because I enjoy the immediacy of it. I continue to evolve in it. It forces me to think faster, so I applaud it for that. And it has gotten me to use equipment that I never thought I'd use before, because basically I just have grown up and been able to save money to buy the things I would actually like to use. So Yeah, for that, I'll thank digital for that.
Sweet. Oh, okay. Well, for me, I would like to, because I too still have my enlarger in the closet. But I mean, one day, if I could get set up, I would love to have a wet lab again, and print prints um, and do it that way. But I'd also like a giant poster Epson digital printer, so I could do some real big work. And I like that I have my feet in traditional film photography, but I'm glad that I also, have my other foot in digital photography, and stepping forward with it, because there have been days, where I just could not get that contrast right. Forget about color photography. Color photography printing absolutely drove me up a wall, because you have your colors, your color filters, and you're like, oh, and then the overhead lights, and then the daylight, and oh my God. And then you print it, and you got to wait for the print, and you get the print. It's like, no, that's not what, it looks great in one light, and you take it into another light. It's like, look at all the, No, now I could just take the file, shoot it, throw it in. The computer will give me 10 variations. God bless you, digital. And life is a whole lot, I won't say necessarily better, but it's a whole lot less stressful, And that's where I am right now. We still are three black Pratt grads from Brooklyn. Y'all in Brooklyn. I'm out here in Cali. So this has been photography talk. So there it is. Are we wrapping here?
Good go,
Hey,
man.
photography talk. Photography talk. I kind of like that. What do you think, Mark? No?
I think that's fine. I mean, we'll see what happens when we all watch this later and go, hey, what did I do that for?
What do you think, Ken? Photography talk?
We can talk about it.
We'll talk about it. We're still working on the three black Pratt grads, but we'll have a discussion on that next time or another time. But soon, stay tuned or tune back in. We'll be here.
Okay.
Deuces.